On the Track is a monthly web TV show about cryptozoology, natural history, green issues, and whatever else the team feel like making up as they go along. Enjoy.
Coming up this week.
Supposed to be some kind of spring-heeled jack figure terrorising an area of Sheffield, which is out towards the M1 junction.
Hello everybody, my name's Hennis, and my friend Mr. Simon from Denmark thinks that I'm a Gnostic Archon. Well, you can't really argue with somebody from Denmark because they've got mermaids and they make my favourite biscuits. So, maybe I am, I don't know. Mr. John, what's in this episode of On the Track?
Well, Hennis, in this episode we speak to Paul Bestall, who's a fascinating researcher from Sheffield, and he also has a podcast about monsters. I don't know if he's ever done a podcast about a monstrous chicken, though.
I really like the old credits.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name's John Downs, and I would like to welcome you to another episode of On the Track. But before we do, we have to go over to the Isle of Man, where we have two very special people waiting for us.
Jeff, we've got a special guest in the studio today, haven't we? Or Barry, we have. That we have, Barry. We've got a very special guest, and his name is Mr. Tony Evershed, and he's going to be coming up on stage and slurping up a sort of meat slurry live on today's show.
I quite often have people, especially those for whom this sceptred isle is not their native country, asking me to explain Richard Freeman's sense of humour. And my answer is, it is completely meaningless. You should not look for meanings, hidden subtexts, or anything really. He's just talking complete bollocks. It is what he does best. Now, as I was saying, my name's John Downs. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, which is the English-speaking world's largest, longest-running, and we like to think the best, cryptozoological and mystery animal research group. And every Saturday afternoon at 3, we give you a half-hour show, just like this one, called On the Track. And it's augmented on Wednesday evenings by a show that lasts for about half that time, which is at 6:30 on Wednesday evenings, and it's called On the Track Extra. And on the last Wednesday of every month, we bring you a show which is, perhaps unsurprisingly, called The Last Wednesday of the Month Show, in which me and the lovely Vivian Powell and our regular panel of V. McCrinnan, Dave Scott, and Ian Squibbs go through the recent and then current mystery animal news, discuss it, debate it, and sometimes, in fact usually, make fun of it, together with what one of my favourite podcasts called a potpourri of delicious guests. Well, I've told you what it is, but what's in it? Well, it is a mixture. It is a melange, and it is a muddle. It's probably other things. I can't think of anything. Lauren, what begins with M?
Manchester, of course.
Thanks, honey, I can work with that. Yes, Lauren is completely correct. We are an absolute mantis for a show, in that we are a sort of cultural ambush predator. We sneak up behind you stealthily and then jump out going, wah! Getting our claws into you and making you into part of the CFZ family before you even realised it. And also, of course, Miss Guinevere, who is a regular part of this show, has an absolute obsession with mantids, and I believe she has over 20 different ones living in her house in Exeter. But apart from that, we've established when the shows are and what the shows are, but we haven't actually established what they consist of. Well, ladies and gentlemen, they are hard science, weird shit, and surreality, all in a beautiful and delicious roulade. Do I mean a roulade? Yeah, I think I probably mean a roulade, all ready for you to munch upon. But what is surreality, I hear you ask? Well, go and ask her.
I'm Lilith, the CFZ cat, and I think you're all stupid, so go away.
Well, Paul, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Tell me.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, John.
How did you first get interested in this stuff?
I mean, it's a mystery now when I look back. I can't sort of pinpoint exactly when, though I was sat transfixed on the settee when Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World first was shown, so I would have been about 8 then. And I had the Usborne books that were around at that time, the ghosts, the monsters, and the mysteries one, and the UFOs. I'm not sure. I think it was probably because I was obsessed with the Universal monsters. I loved Dracula and Frankenstein and the Wolfman, and I think it was a natural progression from fantasy monsters into the real ones and everything else that went around it.
There are a lot of people who say exactly the same thing. So I think it's a generational thing.
Yes, very much so.
Because I know Richard Freeman, for example, he got into it through Doctor Who.
Yes.
Whereas my journey into it was slightly different, but that was because I was brought up in Hong Kong in the last days of the Raj. And I was surrounded by all sorts of weird stuff going on, which was rather cool. So, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, I'm currently continuing to do both the podcast that I do, John, which is my show, Mysteries and Monsters, which obviously investigates and interviews the best authors, investigators, researchers from around the world across all 40 themes. And that's been going now for 6.5 years. And I co-host a Anglo-Canadian ghost story show where we share readers' stories and look at certain locations and states and provinces and dive into their haunted histories as well. And on top of that, I'm trying to finish my first book, which is about lost poltergeist cases or poltergeist cases that don't get the attention there is often prescribed from, say, cases like Enfield and the like. And planning for my 2 upcoming talks in September, because I thought, what better way to celebrate my 53rd birthday than have to do talks at either weekend, bookending it. So it'll be a very restrained birthday, I think, this year, John.
53, you're just a youngster.
Absolutely. I'm not feeling it today, though. I was golfing yesterday, so I'm feeling every muscle in my body today, John.
I'm 66 next month, and I'm doing one of the same gigs as you are. So
yes, you're at the Strange Days, aren't you, sir?
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to seeing Henge. They're a fantastic band.
Yes, I haven't seen them for about 30 years, so yes.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, very much so. And Ruby Tingle as well. I'm looking forward to seeing her perform.
Yeah, she's supposed to be very good. Now, last time you and I were talking, you were talking about some weird cases that were happening around your neck of the woods that you'd been dragged in, not dragged into, but sucked into.
Yes, there seems to be a few. We've got a bit of a UFO flap happening around here at the minute. There seems to be a lot of strange things in the sky, on top of a couple of poltergeist cases that people have reached out and asked me for. So there's a lot of strangeness happening here in Sheffield outside of the usual couple of things that are probably the most well-known weirdness around here, which is obviously Stocksbridge bypass, and we have had some numerous well-known UFO sightings, but it certainly seems that this year things are a bit stranger than normal here in Sheffield, John.
Am I dreaming, or have there been dogman cases in the Sheffield?
I've not seen any from my neck of the woods. There's certainly a lot going on out towards East Yorkshire, up and down the coast there and into North Yorkshire, which Paul Sinclair's doing a lot of work on. And if you've had the opportunity to see his brilliant Wolflands documentary, I recommend that highly, because there's a couple of cases in there with speaking with the witnesses that are extremely hair-raising, which is an ironic turn of phrase when we talk about dogmen, John. But yeah, Sheffield's had a few shook sightings over the years, but not a big one for quite a while, really. But nothing surprises me at the minute. I wouldn't be surprised, but yeah, it seems Dogman's not got to South Yorkshire yet. He's quite happily enjoying the coastal air, it seems, John.
Yeah, I remember Paul telling me about some of the ones on the coast were really peculiar.
Yes, absolutely.
Interesting that you've had black dog sightings, because on the whole in the country, they have got less and less and less the last 50 years. There were quite a few of them when I was a boy, and now they're very much on the decline.
It does. It seems that they've been supplanted by big cats, though I don't think they're the same type of phenomena, John, regardless.
No,
I think the shook was some kind of ethereal, I don't know, elemental or spirit kind of animal, perhaps. I think certainly if you look at some of the cases of those, they seem to disappear very quickly, and they seem to, I suppose it depends. Some cases they seem to act as protectors, and others they seem to sort of want to chase people about a bit. Whereas the ABCs seem very much flesh and blood in comparison, I think, in my opinion, anyway. And certainly the growing evidence is quite substantial. I mean, we even had video evidence of one caught down the road from me in Castleton last year, which is clearly a big black cat. There's no ifs, buts, or maybes about it.
No, as far as big cats are concerned, there is no mystery as far as I'm concerned. They exist. The mystery is not just where they came from, but how they're affecting the rest of the ecosystem. Because we've got a completely artificial ecosystem. We wiped out all the alpha predators a long time ago, most recent being the wolf, and before that the bear, or the lynx, depending who you believe. And we have no apex predator now for a variety of reasons. Using human vectors, there are now apex predators again. How is this going to affect the ecosystem? And is it, as I suspect, going to make the ecosystem much healthier? In the same way as the return of beavers is making the ecosystem healthier.
Absolutely, like you say, we've got a massive gap at the top of the food chain in the British Isles, due to the eradication of all our main predators. So it's unsurprising. I think when you get to the situation where you've got the levels of deer population that we now have in the UK, which are probably I would be very surprised if it's not the highest they've been since medieval times, John, these days, perhaps even more so.
Yeah, because in medieval times they were hunted and eaten.
Yes, absolutely. So there's certainly an incredible food source out there for them, and I suppose it's the fact that we haven't had that kind of serious attack. Obviously, the history of British big cat sightings, there are some incredible sightings. One of my favourites is the weightlifter who ended up having a scuffle with one in his garden in London, I think in the 90s, and he was told that it was just a domestic cat he'd upset, and he said no. No, it wasn't. It pinned me to the ground. It wasn't. And he was like a big 6'2" bodybuilder, I think he was. He was not the kind of man who would be brought down by tiddles, I think, John.
None of the attacks that I personally investigated have turned out to be true. I investigated 2 very high-profile attacks, which both turned out to be nonsense. But one of them, the victim's big brother, it turned out he did it with a Stanley knife. And the other one, it turned out the witness who thought she'd been pinned to the ground by the big cat and scratched was actually on acid at the time, which doesn't really help her veracity as a witness.
No. There's an opportunity for hallucination there, one would say, John, perhaps.
Yeah, I met her boyfriend who said, "Oh, we were both off our tits that weekend," and don't believe anything she said. And in the other case, I had a very splendid evening drinking beer with the investigating police officer on the other case. And he said, for God's sake, don't tell anybody the details, which I never have, because that would get the child taken into care, and that's one thing we don't want to do. But it was 25 years ago now, so he's not a child anymore, and I reckon I can probably say it, but I'm still not giving the details.
Well, I think that's one of the strange things about Forteana, John, is that you will often get people who just try to supplant themselves into incidents or sightings or cases for some reason, and I think that's a Fortean mystery all of its own, is why these people feel so desperate that they need to be parts of certain cases.
Yeah, I mean, I don't put on a cloak and a mask and pretend to be Spring-Heeled Jack, you know.
Well, yes,
I can hardly walk. Probably it wouldn't help that.
Absolutely, we could. Yes, I mean, obviously, we had a Spring-Heeled Jack flap here in the 19th century as well. We had a couple of weird. One was obviously a hoax because he got caught and duffed up for his troubles, John. He got some typical Victorian Sheffield justice, as they would say.
Well, I think he probably deserved it. So.
Yes, absolutely.
I was interested to find out from the late Lee. Did you know Lee Walker is dead now?
I did, yes.
Lovely guy. And he told me about Spring-Heeled Jack sightings in Liverpool recently as 1974.
Yes.
Which amazed me because I thought it was purely a 19th century thing.
I mean, there is a connection up here. Me and Dr. David Clark, I'm sure you know, John, as well. We both stumbled across a story that was repeated on a website. This is quite a strange way it comes round to it. I don't know, about 20 years ago. And then obviously, as I got to know David later, we both talked about this particular thing, where there was supposed to be some kind of Spring-Heeled Jack figure terrorising an area of Sheffield, which is out towards the M1 junction, which is called Attercliffe, which is on your way to the big shopping centre of Meadowhall here now. And that involved a variety of people, including a police officer who encountered a strange character dressed all in black, acting peculiarly, who would bound away in giant leaps when challenged or whatever. And so it was on one particular website here, talking about these incidents in the 1970s, and we didn't think much about it, but I was really fascinated for it. And I went back to college, I don't know, 20 years ago now, John, and did and sort of did all my A-levels as a mature student, just to probably prove to myself that I could have done it instead of having a lot of fun in my teens and early 20s and not focusing perhaps. And as part of that we had to give a sort of end of year presentation, and obviously I decided to do it on local Forteana, and I covered that particular case in Attercliffe. And one of my audience burst into tears during it and got very upset about it, which I thought was quite an odd, because it wasn't a particularly scary story. And she said, "Can I speak to you afterwards?" I said, "Yes, of course." And she lived in that particular area at that period, and basically told me this particular story that had happened to her and her sister. They were upstairs. It was November. She thinks it was either 78 or 79, and they were in an attic bedroom with one of those Velux windows that you have in the roof, John, that you can kind of open at an angle.
Ones that go up like that.
Yes, absolutely. And they were both sat there. That was their shared bedroom, playroom type area, and they were just laid there listening to some records. Quiet night, nothing untoward. Obviously, they're 8-9 years old at this particular point. And they heard a tapping on the glass, and they looked up. And as they looked up, they could just see what they said was like a man's face, but it was really long. So it had a really long chin, like she said it was like an old-fashioned, like a Harlequin or a Joker you'd see on a pack of cards, where they've got that really elongated chin. With burning red eyes, and it was tapping on the window with clawed hands. And she says, "Well, we're in a terraced estate, so all the houses obviously all joined together. This is the top floor. He's on a roof. It's pitch black. It's November at night, and they both screamed their lungs out. Their father came running up. The character ran off. They called the police." And it turned out that several people on the same evening had seen this character tapping on windows and looking in, and they'd reported it to the police, which is what led to the incident with the police officer, which I wasn't aware of. And so from being a story that you thought was perhaps a good yarn that perhaps had been told in a pub and somebody had put it on a website, we suddenly had a first-hand witness who was, and she said, "I've never heard anybody talk about it after that night." And that's what caused her to get upset. She said, because it just brought it all flooding back for me. And that I found quite fascinating. And I suppose that's one of the great aspects of this phenomena is, on occasion, you can be giving a talk about something and just that you're interested in, and it will resonate with someone that's had a similar experience of some nature. And I think that's quite an interesting aspect to the whole world of Forteana, John.
If you want to support us and help us make more content like these, please press like, subscribe, follow our Facebook page and check out our Patreon.
And as the ghost of Joe Strummer, who's an ever more regular visitor to my little studio, says, "Don't forget to ring the notification bell, otherwise you'll miss the new episodes."
And that would be an awful pity, wouldn't it?
If you've been affected by any of the topics in today's episode, you can just bugger off, because we don't give a monkeys. Bloody well get a grip. Sort your own bloody problems out rather than ringing up somewhere.
That was a public information film.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is about it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I want to say a big thank you to my guest this week, who's Paul Bestall, and he will be back next week to carry on with his story about Sheffield's Spring-Heeled Jack and some other bits of weird northern Forteana. It is indeed weird up north. I also want to say a big thank you to my producer, Louis, to my deputy, Graham Inglis, who is also, as well as being my deputy, and also one of my oldest friends, is also my carer, and he's the guy who pushes me around in my wheelchair whenever we have to go to hospital and all the other stuff. And I want to say a big thank you to my assistant director, Gwyn Palmer, Miss Guinevere. First of all, Gwinnykins, thank you for lending me your firstborn, Mohammed, for his smashing contribution earlier on in the show. We're going to be keeping that. And also, thank you for all the other things that you're doing. Now, just something I think I should probably tell you all. As you probably know, there is a monthly free newsletter using MailChimp, which goes out to all the members of the CFZ and those who have subscribed to it, and also the people on our mailing list. Well, I've been doing it for nearly a decade now, and I am rapidly approaching my dotage. My dotage is rapidly approaching me like an out-of-control juggernaut, and so dear sweet Guinevere is taking over some of the things which I am finding it a bit too much for me to deal with these days. Eventually, Gwyn and Louis are going to be taking over the whole organisation, and I will ride off into the darkness, only to be resurrected probably once a year for the weird weekend, when I'll be wheeled in my wheelchair, a bit like young Mr. Grace in Are You Being Served, and say, "You're all doing very well. Now I want a drink." But I got sidetracked then. But thank you, Gwyn, for doing that and everything else you do. I'm going to be back next week, as I said, with the second half of my interview with Paul Bestall. And I am going to be back on Wednesday. What are we talking about on Wednesday? Well, I've done it, but I can't remember, so we'll just have to wait and see on that matter. So, all I can say is, are you going to be watching next Saturday, Mr. McCrinnan? Because if you are, Mr. McCrinnan, I'm going to be doing all the stuff I usually do on a Saturday afternoon, which means the live chat, the notifications, the emails, and then probably going to sleep for the rest of the afternoon, because I'm an old man and I need my nap. But as long as you're there, Mr. McCrinnan, and I'm there doing my gubbins, I will most definitely be seeing you.